Hello everyone and welcome back to Following a Freight Train. This video marks the first episode of the series to feature a train that was operated by Montana Rail Link, which became part of BNSF Railway in January of 2024. From 1987 through 2023, Montana Rail Link operated over 900 miles of rail lines in western Montana on a long-term lease from the Burlington Northern and later BNSF. Most of these were constructed by the Northern Pacific Railway in the 1870s and early 1880s. The main line stretched from Sandpoint, Idaho to Huntley, Montana, about 15 miles east of Billings. While the majority of rail traffic that operated over the MRL consisted of through freights from BNSF Railway, the railroad did operate a few of their own trains. Most of these were a series of locals out of Missoula, Helena, Logan, and Bozeman. MRL's flagship trains were a pair of mainline mixed freights that ran between Missoula and Laurel, Montana, and were known as the LM westbound and the ML eastbound. One of the primary functions of the LM and the ML was to drop off through cars to various yards across the network to supply all the local freights. Periodically, Montana Rail Link also operated a train that was officially designated as the M-LAULAU, a mixed goods train that both originated and terminated at MRL's Laurel Yard. Rail fans often gave this train the nickname of the Bozeman Bullet, the Bozeman Rocket, or sometimes the Laurel to Bozeman Turn. In any event, this train operated during periods of high traffic volume to take some of the burden off of the LM and ML. It would take cars from Laurel directly to Bozeman without stopping, drop off the entire train for use by the Bozeman and Logan locals, pick up any cars waiting to be moved east, and then return to Laurel. Locomotives used for this train varied, but were always from MRL's fleet of 6-axle EMD units. In later years, SD40-2XR types were standard power for the train, but on occasion, other locomotives were also used, including SD70 ACE types and even SD45s. In this video, we will travel back to the year 2023 as we take a look at one of the last runs of the LAU under Montana Rail Link operations. Our focus will be on one particular run of the train that occurred on June 19th of 2023, but we will also see scenes from other trips. We begin our journey following the Bozeman Turn in Laurel, Montana. These particular scenes were filmed after the BNSF takeover in early 2024. Laurel was the major yard on the east end of the MRL system. Even under BNSF operations, the yard continues to play a critical role. Each trip of the LAU began here with the train being assembled. Times would vary, but the crew for the train was typically on duty at 2 p.m. with a departure not long after. Sometimes the LAU would depart later in the afternoon. The train was scheduled to operate 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. On a personal note, I was especially interested in seeing the Bozeman Turn in June of 2023 because MRL Locomotive 355 was one of the units regularly assigned to the train at that time. The 355 was the last SD45 type locomotive in service with the MRL, so seeing it in action was a rare treat. Over the course of its existence, Montana Rail Link owned over 70 of these machines. The particular run of the LAU I captured on video would be one of the last runs of the train under MRL. By the following week, the train was abolished. BNSF briefly revived the LAU following their takeover of operations in January of 2024. In August of 2022, photographer Luke Renish captured this scene of the LAU departing Laurel Yard behind a pair of MRL SD40s. 25 miles west of Laurel, we come to Columbus, the first major town on the 130-mile-long journey to Bozeman. Columbus is a quiet community of about 2,000 residents. The old Northern Pacific Depot still stands and is now used for storage by the railroad. No stops were normally scheduled for the Bozeman turn to set out freight cars between Laurel and Bozeman, so, if there was no other traffic to wait for, the train came sailing through town. On the west side of Columbus, I got my first glimpse of the Bozeman turn as it rolled through Columbus and then along a scenic curve on the banks of the Yellowstone River on June 19, 2023. Trains follow the Yellowstone River as far west as Livingston, Montana. SD40-2XR 263 brought the Bozeman turn west along the river with SD45 355 in tow at 3:15 p.m. Further west of town, a Bozeman turn is seen running along the river in August of 2022. This vantage point is off the side of old US Highway 10. West of Reed Point, a very short LAU rolls by a passing siding. As mentioned earlier, this train occasionally ran with other 6-axle power besides SD40s. In this July of 2022 scene, SD70 ACE 4404 is in the lead. At a location on the railroad known as Quebec, the 263 once again had the Bozeman turn moving right along with dark storm clouds in the background. Just before the town of Big Timber, the LAU passed through a vibrant green field as sun began to break through the clouds. Around the next bend was Big Timber, the last major town before Livingston. At a broad sweeping curve along the Yellowstone River, several peaks that make up a range known as the Crazy Mountains reached up to touch the sky as the Bozeman rocket continued along. We were just 15 miles east of Livingston and 40 from Bozeman. Another group of clouds moved in as the train approached the outskirts of Livingston. Sheep Mountain was visible in the background. On this particular day, the crew received word that they would have to make an unscheduled stop just ahead in Livingston to pick up a BNSF locomotive. Livingston is located on the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains and is often recognized as one of the gateways to Yellowstone National Park. It is also the site of the former Northern Pacific locomotive shops, still used today by the railroad. During the years of Montana Rail Link, this was the main locomotive repair facility. All of MRL's diesel locomotives were maintained here. Immediately to the west of Livingston is Bozeman Pass, the only major grade on the line between Laurel and Bozeman. With a summit at 5,600 feet in elevation and grades as steep as 2%, Bozeman Pass was nothing to be trifled with, especially in the winter. For the heavy through trains, MRL stationed helper locomotives out of Livingston to assist with the climb over the mountains. The Laurel to Bozeman freight came to a stop just shy of the 1902 Livingston station to pick up BNSF ES44C4 locomotive 6716. In a move symbolic of things to come, the 6716 was brought forward past a switch and then backed on to the head end of the train. At 5:40 p.m., the BNSF Diesel led the two MRL locomotives and their train west out of Livingston and toward Bozeman Pass. Near the summit of Bozeman Pass, Luke Renish captured another view of the Bozeman turn as two SD-40s battled the grade. At the top of Bozeman Pass is a 3,000-foot-long tunnel constructed in 1945. An older, now out-of-service tunnel was built in 1885 and sits adjacent to the current bore through the mountain. Bozeman Pass summit is marked with a sign recognizing the Lewis and Clark expedition, which passed through here in 1806. It's hard to believe it, but at the time, railroads as we know them didn't even exist. In fact, the first successful steam locomotives were still another 20 years off. BNSF 6716 idled as the LAU crested the summit and coasted down grade for the final few miles into Bozeman. the train reached the end of its westbound journey at Bozeman. All of the cars were dropped off in the Bozeman yard to be picked up by the local. Some of the nearby businesses that take cars from the various locals include grain silos and lumber transloading facilities in Bozeman, Logan, and Harrison, a roofing materials company in Belgrade, a petroleum facility in Logan, and talc mills in Three Forks and Sappington. Northern Pacific's 1909 vintage passenger depot in Bozeman had seen better days, looking rather forlorn and forgotten. Plans to bring Amtrak passenger trains back to southern Montana may result in the reactivation of this historic station at some point down the line. With all the cars dropped off, the crew of the LAU moved the locomotives back to the east end of the yard to pick up the short train destined for Laurel. For the eastbound trip, the 355 would be in the lead of the train. Even this close to the longest day of the year, the sun was quickly approaching the horizon by the time the 355 brought its train east over Bozeman Pass. Rocky Creek gurgled noisily below the tracks. With the sun just barely crusting the Rockies enough to illuminate the train, the LAU neared the bottom of the grade on approach into Livingston. I got one final look at the 355 and the eastbound Bozeman turn a few miles east of Livingston in the fading twilight. From here, the LAU would continue another 90 miles to Laurel Yard, where it would complete its journey. And with that, we bring our journey to a close. Thanks for coming along with me for our first Following a Freight Train episode on the Montana Rail Link. As always, a special thanks to all my supporters on Patreon. Additionally, a big thank you to Luke Renish for providing additional video for this project. If you have any suggestions for future episodes of Following a Freight Train, post them below in the comments section. To receive notifications whenever I post to YouTube, click on the subscribe button and select the Receive All Notifications option. I'll be back next Friday at 9 AM Pacific Time for a brand new railroading adventure right here on the YouTube channel. That's it for now. Until next time, I'm Mike Armstrong. I'll see you down the line. Thanks for watching.